By the late 1960s, the Cold War had dragged on for over 2 decades, leaving the world in a state of perpetual tension. Nuclear weapons loomed over humanity, proxy wars raged, and the fear of total annihilation felt ever-present. But as the 1970s approached, a new chapter began, one defined by an attempt to ease the suffocating grip of the Cold War. This era would be known as détente. By the end of the 1960s, it became clear to both the United States and the Soviet Union that the Cold War could not continue in its current form. Escalating arms races and military spending drained both superpowers. Meanwhile, the world's citizens clamored for peace, pushing leaders to rethink their strategies. Détente emerged as a policy aimed at reducing hostility and preventing nuclear war. It wasn't about ending the Cold War altogether. It was about finding ways to coexist without risking mutual destruction. One of the first significant steps during détente was the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT. These discussions, initiated in 1969, sought to put a cap on the number of nuclear weapons each superpower could possess. In 1972, the SALT-I Treaty was signed, freezing the number of intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarine-launched missiles for both sides. While it didn't eliminate existing weapons, it was a crucial step toward arms control. In 1972, President Nixon shocked the world by visiting China, a communist nation previously seen as an adversary. This groundbreaking trip symbolized a major shift in global geopolitics. By normalizing relations with China, the U.S. not only opened the door to new diplomatic opportunities, but also increased pressure on the Soviet Union, further encouraging détente. Perhaps the most iconic symbol of détente was the Helsinki Accords, signed in 1975 by 35 nations, including the United States, the Soviet Union, and most of Europe. This agreement was historic. It aimed to reduce tensions by addressing key issues like borders, human rights, and economic cooperation. The Accords confirmed Europe's post-World War II borders, something the Soviets valued greatly. In return, they agreed to respect human rights, a concession the West hoped would spark change within Eastern Bloc nations. Despite its achievements, détente had its limits. While agreements like SALT and the Helsinki Accords reduced tensions, they didn't eliminate the underlying mistrust between the superpowers. Both sides continued to compete in proxy wars, like in Vietnam and Angola. Additionally, the Soviet Union largely ignored its human rights commitments under the Helsinki Accords, frustrating the West. By the late 1970s, détente began to unravel. Events like the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 and the election of Ronald Reagan, who took a hardline stance against communism, reignited Cold War tensions. The brief hope of coexistence gave way to a new era of confrontation. Détente was a moment in history when humanity took a step back from the brink of destruction. It demonstrated that even in the midst of ideological conflict, dialogue and cooperation were possible. However, it also revealed the fragility of peace and the deep divisions that defined the Cold War. Though détente ultimately faded, its legacy endures. It set the stage for future agreements and paved the way for leaders to continue the fight for a more peaceful world. Join me next time as we explore the events that reignited Cold War tensions and led to the final act of this epic geopolitical saga.